Hello and welcome. You're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Dave Schrader, along with me, Tim Dennis. Hello, Tim.
Hey.
How you doing today, sir?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Don Wildman is joining us next week, Tim.
Yeah.
Mysteries in the Museum. I've loved that show for a long time. He has a brand new program, and he's going to be joining us next week to discuss this new program, Buried Worlds. We're going to hear about some really fascinating stories, including his search for the truth behind vampires and witches and so many other great cases. We're going to talk with Don Wildman next week here on the Best in Paranormal Talk Radio. Another quick update, Tim. I am hitting the road tomorrow. We begin filming the second part of season 2. They have decided to drag us back out into the real world, pull us out from the comfort of our homes and put us back out there to filming. And we've got 8 more episodes to record. So I will be out in the field filming again for the Holzer Files and delivering some more fun stories. So just giving people an update. We'll continue bringing you great Darkness Radio and True Crime Tuesday episodes. Fear not, faithful listeners. We will not let you down. We didn't during the coronavirus. We will stay with you until they pry these microphones from our cold, dead hands, Tim.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
And then at that point, there's no telling. We may just come broadcasting ourselves through your radio in kind of an afterlife chronicle as well. So you never know. You never know what you're going to get with the two of us.
It'll still be very creepy, even after we're dead. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what's not creepy is our next guest, Tim. Today, joining us, Annie Mattingly is here. The book we're going to discuss, the After Death Chronicles, true stories of comfort, guidance, and wisdom from beyond the veil. Plus, she's written more. We're going to talk with her about some of these great stories. Annie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing some time with us today.
Well, I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, but 3 years waiting. Isn't that about right? I
Something like that. It's been quite a while.
Annie and I had set up, we were trying to find a time for an interview, and it was just one of those things where the email got lost in time in my deal, and I finally found emails that were put into this weird side folder in our email system. I found her responses. We finally connected. We were talking back in 2017 when this book was released, and here we are just 3 years later. It's well worth the wait, is my thought. You know, let's wait, save the best for last, but we've got you on now. The After Death Chronicles, stories of comfort, guidance, and wisdom from beyond the veil. Annie, what brought you to researching and writing a book like this?
Well, I suppose in a way it was a long path. I had a little bit of experience after my parents died, 25, 30 years ago it is now, more than that, and had sort of opened me to the idea that there was a possibility of some kind of contact with someone you love after they died. And then that was brought up in a very large and painful way in 2010, following the death of my daughter. I was not at that time thinking at all about after-death communication, even though the seed had been planted before. But then a week or two or 3 weeks, I think it was, after she died, one morning she awakened to me with sensations in my body, and it was so overwhelmingly comforting to be aware that I could have that kind of contact, and also relieving because I knew that simply by her presence, I knew that she was all right. And that...
Now, 1 second. You said that you became aware of her because of sensations in your body or on your body?
In my body. I guess I'll be more specific about how this occurred. I was dead asleep. There's that. I shouldn't use that word dead, but anyway, I was sound asleep. I was sound asleep. It was very early in the morning, just barely light. And at that point, I really hated waking up in the morning because it was like waking up into the nightmare of remembering that my daughter was dead. And I felt this kind of like goosebumps. It was just like goosebumps coming up the whole left side of my body from my feet up to the top of my head. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And I turn over and try to go back to sleep, and it happened again. And then it happened a third time, but it just flooded my whole body. From the bottom of my feet, shoosh, this energy like a river came all the way up out the top of my head. And I sat up, and this is a moment that I've later heard from many other people where somehow we know something that we don't know how we know this, because her name was Randy, her nickname was Randy, and I sat up and I said, "Randy, is this you? If it's you, do something so I know." And I looked around the room. I'm looking, I want something to move, I want something dramatic, and nothing happens. And there's a little pause, and she says, "Your body knows." And that's all she said that first time. But my body did know. I knew in my body that this was her.
Did this voice, would you say it spoke in your head, or did you hear it out loud?
In that is the only time in all of our hundreds of contacts that it was out loud. It was her voice. It was as though she were in the room. It was unmistakable. You can't not recognize your daughter's voice, And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was her voice, and I knew also that this was her waking me up.
Now, you said that you'd had experiences or something when your parents had passed away as well. Is that something you want to be a little bit more open with us on?
Certainly. I have nothing to hold back here. It was a different kind of an experience because it occurred in my dreams. In order for it to make sense, I have to tell you a little bit about my parents. My father had polio when he was 2 years old and always walked with canes. And my mother, before she met my father, was an extremely good ballroom dancer. But of course, they never danced together because of his disability. And they died very close together, 16 days apart. So it was pretty difficult. And also within, they died the end of November and early December, and this was in sometime early January, so about a month or so later. I had a dream in which I was standing on the edge of a very large ballroom, beautiful parquet floor, chandeliers, and I could hear Strauss waltz being played on the other side of the room by an orchestra. I couldn't see the orchestra. And there was a couple circling the dance floor way on the other side. And when they came close, I could see the woman's skirt was swirling wide. It was really beautiful. And when they got really close, I saw that it was my parents dancing together. And I called out. I said, "Mother, Daddy, I'm calling out to them." Nothing. So I go and I move onto the dance floor and try to block them. They just dance around me and go on. And when I awakened from this dream, and this is another revealing part, I think, about how dreams can, a dream with the dead that is an after-death communication is different from just simply dreaming about their parents. So my first feeling was how beautiful it was that my parents were able to dance together. And the second one was a sense of maybe right order about the fact that they had died so close together. I had been bordering on angry before that. It's like my mother died of cancer, and how come my father had to die 16 days later? Couldn't he have hung on for us? It wasn't, I know he wanted to be with her, but what about us, me and my sister, and his grandchildren? But I had, this sense that it was the right thing, that he had there is something called post-polio syndrome that begins in the latter part of life for someone who's had polio as a child. And this was beginning to affect him pretty dramatically. And I think even though he was still appeared to be healthy, it was time. It was simply time. And I accepted that because of the dream in a way that I had not accepted it in that first month when I was upset and angry. And it didn't make me not grieve to have this dream, but it nevertheless calmed something in me. And that is a fairly common result from a dream with an after-death communication dream, to have some aspect of what you're feeling be relieved and satisfied and relaxed by having that connection.
To see something like that is so extraordinary. And to have this kind of communication with them. Did you say, did they seem to know you were there? Or were you almost like a hologram in their world watching?
That's more what it felt like. And I think that if this had been another kind of dream, I would have been upset because they didn't pay attention to me, but I wasn't. It just seemed normal. They were in their world and I was in my world, and we could have this contact, but it was not to be an exchange. So whether they even knew I was there or not, I don't know, but they certainly didn't pay any attention.
Well, with that said, here's kind of a nice closure moment. You get to see the two of them happy, healthy, together, right, doing something that they would love to do. Mm-hmm. But yet there isn't this finalization of them acknowledging you. How does that leave you at the end of an experience like that? Did you feel satisfied? Was it good enough just to know they were happy and together?
It was in that case. It was. Okay. Yeah, it felt completely right, and allowed me to move into the next stages of my grief, really, in a healthier way.
And now, do you consider this a dream visitation?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Had you ever had any experiences with them after death that felt like it was in the waking moment, like there was something they were letting you know that they were still around you, that things were okay?
Well, I have never had any kind of experience other than that with my father, which I've found disappointing. But and I had not had any other experiences with my mother other than that dream until after my daughter's death. And then when my daughter began visiting me on a regular basis, sometime into that, it must have been more than a year, because I think it might have even been after I wrote the book. So it was a year or more, or a few years after my daughter's death, my mother began to show up with my daughter at the same time. And the way that I receive on an intuitive basis is it's occasionally through my dreams, but it's more frequently through my body, like those sensations that I described, and audibly. I hear. I don't see. I don't have any visions. That just doesn't happen for me. But so my daughter, Randy, I feel through the left side of my body, and my mother, I feel through the right side of my body. So if I feel it on both sides, I know they're both there. And my mother has come in a few dreams fairly recently, within the last 2 years. But it is more common for her to come on this right side of my body. And when they both come now, because it's now been 10 years since Randy's death, or coming up on 10 years, when they both come, it's usually because something is going on in my life where I need help. And I don't have to ask for it. They simply show up, usually very early in the morning. That's my kind of most cleared place spiritually. And it is when I do my spiritual practice, my mantras, and at that time I will feel this sensation and then sometimes receive guidance or support of some kind. Sometimes it's might be health related. I've got something going on, and I'm going, what should I do about this? And I'll get guidance from them.
You have these very profound experiences for yourself. You see things happen and sense this. And this is what brings you to want to explore this deeper and talk to more people? Well, what happened was after Randy died, and I was having these experiences on a fairly regular basis with her. And at first I just kept my mouth shut until
first I told my husband, but I wasn't talking about them in general, and then I decided kind of cautiously to tell someone. And I told the first person, and right away she told me an experience that she had had. And I found that pretty interesting because I'd known her for a while, and why wouldn't she have told me this before? And then I told someone else, and it just kept, every time I told someone, they either had a personal experience of their own, or they knew someone very close. Like, I remember someone telling me that after her father's death, her mother had an experience with her father. So I was receiving these, like day by day, and I got fascinated. I said, why aren't we talking about this? Why do people act like this is kind of a wild and unusual experience if indeed it is happening to many people? So I opened up to others. I told people that I was interested in hearing more stories, and then I ended up putting flyers and, advertising in a small way. I didn't have to advertise in a large way because I got so many people I would get emails from people that I'd never heard of saying, oh, well, I've had this experience, and would you like to hear from my sister because she had this experience? And
does that surprise you how open and willing people were to share this? It
did at first, but then I realized that as soon as people knew that I had an experience, they were no longer afraid to share. A lot of people told me experiences they had never told anyone else. Or they had told.
Right, but it's one thing to share it with you, but knowing you're about to share this with the world, it becomes something, even more personal.
Well, they did seem to feel sort of honored by that, about the fact that there was a chance to share the experience in a way that, a few requested anonymity, and I did change names in most cases, not always, depending on what people wanted. But I think they felt good involved in a project that was showing that this was normal and right. And they felt that it was helpful to other people because they knew how helpful these experiences were to them. So if they shared them, they were helping others who were grieving.
We all go through grief, and not everyone has these type of experiences, though. What do you say to people that are dealing with this but not having that kind of connection that you've had?
Well, I say quite a few things, really. The first is that there's more mystery in this than, we can't figure this out. We can't sort this out and say, well, if you do this, that's going to happen. If you behave properly spiritually, I've heard people say this, if you just open up, you will have this contact. And yet I've talked to psychics who say that there are a few times that they have tried to reach someone who was dead, and just they're blocked. They will not come, and they don't know why. And so we have to be open to the mysterious part of this, I think. But then the second part is that we can help to make this, to access this. It doesn't come with guarantees, but yet if we, first of all, try to influence that skeptical part of ourselves and allow the possibility that this can happen, that's a start. That's for setting the stage.
So do you think that more people are having after-death communication, but they're just not recognizing it as such?
I think sometimes that is the case. Sometimes people just deny it. They say, "Oh well, I'll be talking to someone and they'll say, "Oh, I've never had anything like that happen," and then I'll continue talking, and then they'll go, "Well, there was this one time, but it was probably nothing," and then they tell me something that I've heard repeatedly, and so they are blocking it with their minds, with the mental part of themselves. And if they create a situation, setting up a little altar, putting a picture on a shelf with a candle, setting aside a time to try to you can wait for contact from the other side, but you can also initiate it on your side by simply talking to the person or writing to the person or drawing something for the person. And this can make a pathway for the possibility to occur.
People from all walks of life have these experiences, and
absolutely,
it seems to cross religious barriers. People that are believers or non-believers have had these experiences. It's really kind of exciting and wondrous to hear these kind of tales. Since your book came out, do you continue to get more and more messages? Are we going to see a follow-up book as well?
I don't know. It's not in the cards right now, but I didn't know this book was going to be in the cards either, so who knows? If I felt called to write this book, and if I feel called to write another, I will. People do tell me stories still. I get contacts through people I know, and also through my website. People will simply write and say, I want to tell you about, and they will tell me about the experiences that have happened to them. So I'm not putting a lot of focus on it right now, but I interviewed 2 people within the last, I don't know, with COVID it's confusing, within the last couple of months,
I'm Andrew Saul, Commissioner of Social Security. Beware of telephone scammers pretending to be government employees. Real Social Security employees will never threaten you. Callers threatening you with arrest or other legal action and demanding money are not from us. If you receive a call like this, hang up, do not provide them with any form of payment or information. Report the call at oig.ssa.gov.
As an organ donor, your story doesn't have to end. The good in you can live on. In fact, you could save up to 8 lives and restore sight and health for many more. Sign up right now online as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. You'll be happy you did, and just maybe someone else will be happy too. Go to organdonor.gov. It saves lives. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Health Resources and Services Administration.
The After Death Chronicles, True Stories of Comfort, Guidance, and Wisdom from Beyond the Veil. That's the name of the book. We have a link for that book on today's program. As a matter of fact, if you go to darknessradio.com, click on the shop tab, or if you use our handy-dandy app. What? You didn't know we have an app? We do. We have a Darkness Radio app. You can go to the Google Play Store or iTunes Store, get the free Darkness Radio app, download it. You can take the show along with you, listen anytime from there. You'll see all the other cool little buttons we have. But you can visit our Amazon shop, and every purchase you make, a small portion goes to Darkness Radio. So it doesn't take away from the authors or the creators. It is just a little way of us helping to spread all of this great information, all these great products. And we have in our shop everything from books that you hear featured on the show to clothing lines, toys, games, and more fun things to keep you busy during this lockdown situation. So make sure you go check it out. There's a link for it at our shop site at Darkness Radio, or you can find it in our Darkness Radio app, or just follow the link in on today's book that you see on our posting, and you can go in, order the book, and find other items there as well. All right, Annie, let's start digging into some of your favorite stories that you collected, some of the ones that really stood out to you as just some of the most unusual, unique, and beautiful stories.
Okay. Well, certainly, first of all, I love them all, no matter how simple they are. The fact that something is dramatic feeds our desire for drama. But as far as the person having the experience, the most simple thing where someone simply hears the phrase, I am okay, and receives that fully is as dramatic for that individual as any other story. But I will tell a story about a woman whose brother had died by suicide, which, by the way, is how my daughter died. So a certain portion of the people that I interviewed had that experience of losing someone through the death by their own hands. But this woman was very distraught after her brother's death. she was crying. She had headaches all the time. She was just really having a very, very tough time. And she went for a walk in a park near where we both used to live there in the Bay Area of California, up in the Oakland Hills. And in this park, way deep, when you walk into these woods, somebody had created a labyrinth. And she's walking, and she's crying, and she's worrying, and just she can't figure out why her brother has done this thing. And she sees the labyrinth and goes into the labyrinth and sits down cross-legged and closes her eyes. And while she's sitting there with her eyes closed, she can feel her brother's presence. Now, at that point, it's simply a sensation. She feels aware that he is there. And in fact, it seems like he's there all around her. And she opens her eyes, and he is there all around her. There's a circle of her brothers, one after another. I don't remember now how many. There were like 10 or something like this. And one is to her left and puts his right arm around her, and one is to her right and puts his left arm around her. And they just sit there and tell her that I guess that's not right, that he says that he is all right, that he is okay, that everything is fine. And because of how powerfully, and she does do visual art, so this may be why she had this experience in a visual way, because of the power of seeing all of these brothers, these copies of her brother, and hearing his voice on both sides of her and in front of her, she is able to really accept that he is okay. And just as most of these experiences have a tendency to take us into another layer of our grief and relax us from that for initial most troubling part, she is greatly relieved.
I know, through the genesis of our program over the last 14 years, we've talked to a lot of people that have these moments of kind of clarity and communication with the spirit realm. Do many of the people that have these ever leave with more confusion? We hear about all the great stories, but do people ever relate to you, the spirit seems puzzled or maybe even angry or doesn't realize it's dead? Is there any aspect of that maybe isn't as popular as the other stories we hear?
Well, I heard a couple of stories like that. And sometimes what happened was the living person was frightened. And this is a place where I want to give some advice, and I'll share an experience of my own that will illustrate that. I'd say about 2 months after Randy died, I was sitting watching a movie at home, a DVD with my husband, and I was enjoying it completely. And until I started to feel really sick. I was sick to my stomach, and I felt awful, like I was coming down with the flu or something of that nature. And I kind of lost touch with what was happening to the movie. I sat there it was close to the end. I sat there for the rest of it, and then immediately got in bed. It was nighttime. And as soon as I laid down, I knew that Randy was with me, and it did not feel good. She was agitated, and it was making my whole body feel really bad. And I went, this is not all right. And I asked her after, I said, Randy, what's going on? And she was talking about something which sounded like, she didn't use this phrase, but it sounded very much like the concept of the life review, where she was being shown things about her life. And she was asking me for help, and I said, She said, look, there are beings where you are who can help you a lot better than I can. This is not my field of expertise. And I'm laughing now. I probably didn't say it exactly like that. I said, you go and ask them. And as soon as I did that, all these sensations in my body left. I felt fine. I wasn't sick. And she was gone. And I went almost immediately to sleep. And when I wakened in the morning, in the usual way, she came and she was calm. And it wasn't like this. And what we ended up doing was, she told me that what she had been upset about had to do with recognizing that there were some aspects of her parenting that had been flawed. And so I talked to her about some of the aspects of my parenting that had been flawed, some of the mistakes that I had made. And the two of us, I've jumped ahead here, because I asked her I said, now that you're calm, is there anything I can do for you? And she said, you could hold me. And it's very difficult to explain this, but we lay in the bed with our arms around each other, and it felt as though she were truly physically in my arms. And then we talked about the flaws in our parenting, and it was as though instead of being a mother and a daughter, we were on a much more equal level.
How beautiful and cathartic for both of you.
Extremely so. You've nailed it by using the word cathartic. But so there was that. That was just a lovely, lovely experience. But it taught me something too, that I've been able to share with other people about the fact that if someone is afraid of the contact, or if there is something frightening that happens from the dead person, and I've only heard a couple of minor things about that, send them away. Say, you don't belong here. You are in the realm of the dead, and you need to be there and ask for your help there. I cannot help you, and you can't harm me, because we have the most power in this realm. We are in the physical realm. They are visiting the physical realm. They don't have the physical anymore. And any harm they can do to us, I believe, is because we've allowed it to happen. We can stop it. We can send them back. And as I saw in my experience, and then they get the help that they need, and then if they visit, it returns to a beautiful place instead of this frightening one.
That's great advice. What advice do you have, before we take our break, what advice do you have to people that want to have these experiences? How do you open up to this, to have a good, fruitful, open experience with a loved one that's crossed, or to call in, I guess, the right loved one?
Mm-hmm. Well, I advise creating a time and a space and a setting in which you will invite this contact to happen. This can be a place, it can be Friday night at 6 o'clock after you come from work, if you're able to go to work now, and that's what's going on in the world with COVID. At 6 o'clock, let's say, you set aside that time, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, and you write them a letter, you tell them what's going on in your life, you listen, you wait. Maybe you light a candle to honor it, or you could go for a walk. But have it as a dedicated time to open to this possibility, and then see what happens. If you're walking, you can watch for signs from the natural world. See if a bird does something surprising. And another vital thing, if you have the smallest thing happen, you think, did that bird really do something surprising? Say thank you. Say the person's name. Say, thank you, Randy. Are you visiting me through this bird? Thank you so much. We need to acknowledge, in the same way that we would acknowledge and express gratitude to a living person who comes to visit. You'd say, thanks for stopping by. Well, it's the same thing. And this is a way to help ourselves to open to having an experience.
It's interesting you say watch for a bird to do a strange thing. Filming the series The Holzer Files, we were investigating Oceanborn Mary's house, and here is this girl who was raised with the stigma of this very strange legend of her life and her family's life being spared by this pirate who would dress all in crimson with this large red plume on his hat. And here we are at this house, and the woman said that something happened just before we got there. It never happened before. This large red cardinal kept slamming into her window like it was trying to get in. And she said she'd never seen it, and it wouldn't stop. It just kept throwing itself into her window. And then we uncover all the story regarding this weird pirate story and the fact that when he would try to take things over, he would dress all in red with this hat with the large feathery plume. And the minute we're going to be there, a cardinal of all birds starts throwing itself into the window, trying to enter the home and enter the story again. It's really kind of cool. Coincidence or not, it was a very unique and interesting kind of moment. We have to take a break. We'll come back. We've got more. The book is called The After Death Chronicles. There's a link for it. Go order it right now. We'll be back. Stay tuned. You're listening to the best in Paranormal Talk Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
All the talks we've had over the years, including what you've told me about not using alcohol and other drugs, they stick with me. And believe it or not, they really do make a difference, especially at times that matter most.
Hey, want a drink?
No thanks, I'm good. So thank you, Dad, for talking and preparing me for what's ahead.
Thank you for talking.
For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Welcome back to the program. Thanks for tuning in. This is the best in Paranormal Talk Radio. This is Darkness Radio. I'm Dave Schrader. That's Tim Dennis. And joining us, Annie Mattingly. True stories of comfort, guidance, and wisdom from beyond the veil. All right, where do you want to take us next in these unusual and beautiful encounters?
Well, I want to go back a little bit because
Please.
you mentioned the word coincidence. With the cardinal and the red-plumed pirate and so on. And that, I think, is one of the biggest blocks we use. It's our mind going, oh, it has to be a coincidence. It's just chance. And I think it's not a useful word if we're looking for experiences like this. It doesn't serve us because it tends to make us disbelieve whatever we see, whatever we experience. So that's all. So
that's a great point. I just know you do have a lot of the skeptics out there, a lot of the people that stand back, and not even skeptical in a bad way. They want to have experiences as well, but it's like almost like they're afraid to allow themselves to have those moments.
Well, our culture kind of trains us that way. It tells us we're crazy, we're troubled. There are experts who talk about this. I mean, I think one of the worst stories I ever heard was of a pediatrician who would tell parents if their child died that if they had an experience that they might think that he or she was talking to them or visiting them in some way, and if they had this problem to let them know, and he would give them something to make that go away. So if these are what our experts are saying,
right.
It's easy to think we shouldn't behave in this way, that it's something a little nuts.
Well, and you understand, I mean, from some aspects, the medical sciences, the, psychology, they necessarily can't put this in the right box. So they can't define it, and it's hard for them. And then, there are people, and I'm sure you know this as well, there are people who become so obsessed with the afterlife that they forget to live their life. They're so focused on communicating with the dead that that their life starts suffering. And, important messages like this. I love books like yours, and I love people like you coming forward to share this. But the thing I always take away from this is not how close we really are in life and death, but how much more close we should be in life. And that if you make time now to say the things that you want to say and never leave those people wondering and never leave a compliment or a kind word unsaid, you'll never feel that emptiness of, that's been the biggest bridge for my mom and I, and why I think I handle her loss so much better is we never left things out. We never, I wish I would have told her how much she meant to me. She knew every day how much she meant to me. And I think that's an important lesson. I'm not over the grieving. It still is a part of me, but I think that that's a bigger part of me is that I'm so glad that I made the best of the time that I had with the people I love. And I try to tell them every day how much I love them and what they mean to me in different ways. Do you think that that's an important element to this as well? Will that not necessarily stop grieving, but do you think it gives an element of peace to the grieving?
It does. It does. Then we don't have as many regrets. I mean, we have the loss, the grief. The grief is real. None of this makes the grief go away, as you were just saying. But to know that we have loved and expressed our love and our caring as much as we knew how takes away that, oh my God, what if I should have, what if. And I know that it is certainly a major lesson that came, a gift, I would call it a gift, that came from my daughter's death, because at first, I think there was a little obsession in it. My husband would go off to do an errand and come back 10 minutes later, and I'd start thinking, oh, should I call the cops? Should I call 911? What's happened? I recovered from that, but I learned that if he was going for the errand or I was going for the errand, there was nothing wrong with crossing back across the kitchen and going, honey, I love you, or just touching his face, just expressing how important he or some others are in my life, instead of waiting to do it tomorrow or some special occasion or something, because it taught me that I only have this moment with this person. I may have others, but the only guaranteed one is this one that I'm in.
Right.
And that is a real gift. That is a real gift. I know that I have become more expressive of my love because of that. And
beautiful.
That's wonderful. I like having that in my life, and I think the people around me like that, and I get the sense that people are aware of my caring in a way that they might not have been before.
Let's dig deep into some more of these profound encounters. I think it comforts people to hear these stories. So where do you want to go next?
Well, I think the most common kind of there are a lot of different kinds of experiences, and I'll kind of go through a little bit of those. We've got dreams and visions, and the simply knowing that someone's there. Olfactory experiences where a smell is connected to someone. Auditory experiences like mine, and electrical and physical experiences. Nature, synchronous things, and all kinds of things that I can't even imagine, because I'm forever hearing new things. But the most common is dreams, and I think it's because that's the most people can accept that dreams are okay, so they don't have to question it so much. They don't have to worry about whether they're crazy if they have a dream. And so I think I'll start with some dreams and tell a little bit. First of all, when I got into working on my chapter on dreams, or I was focused on dreams all the time, I got really mired in darkness, and I couldn't figure out what was going on, why I was feeling so different while I was working on this. And then I realized that I seemed to be processing or working with a lot of very difficult deaths, drownings and suicides and very sudden deaths where it was completely unexpected. And so then I went through and charted all of these dream experiences and found out that many, many more people had dreams following difficult deaths than more peaceful deaths, let's say, where, it's an older person and they've been sick for a while and they slowly go and somebody's sitting with them. Those did not seem to trigger the dream so much, but the difficult deaths did. And I think that's, because they are so easily accepted, the comfort is available in these situations where it's really needed because the deaths were so difficult. So what kind of story should I tell from that?
And that you make great points with that, right? I mean, that kind of almost fits into the realm like I was talking about. I felt crippled because I didn't get to say goodbye to my grandfather. I didn't get that chance. And when he came to me in a dream visitation, it was because I was traumatizing myself so much about it. But because I was there with my mom at the end of her journey, and we were so loving and vocal to one another about all of it, she has not visited me that way. So, it's interesting when it does seem to be more of that kind of, I don't want to say unrequited, but when it seems to be that unfulfilled, and that's a bad word too, and it's never like death is fulfilling, but that there's still something left out there. That's when we seem to have these. And then I've been left with it as well, and I wonder how many of the people, or even yourself, are left wondering, but are these experiences truly with the spirit of our loved one, or is it with an angelic being taking that form to help us and comfort us through that moment?
Well, all I know is it feels like it is. It is really the person. But, when you get into the fine points of whether it's an angelic being in disguise, I don't know. I really don't know. And I'm not sure that it matters, because if it is an angelic being taking that form, I think it is with permission of the person who's died. I doubt that anyone would take that over. Any positive being would take over that role without permission. And so it's still contact in a certain way. And it certainly feels, I don't know, when I think, when you're in a body, and if we are paying attention, we will notice that there are times when we are aware that someone we know is behind us, or we know who's going to call when the phone rings, or we have a connection with people that is beyond the physical, that we can recognize. We know who they are on some other level, with some other outside of our five senses. We are aware of the presence of people we know well. And so I think we recognize them, even when they're not in the physical.
That's a great point, because so many people will ask me, and they have this fear, Dave, what if it's not them? What if it's something trying to trick me and it's taking on that guise? There's that inherent fear in people. How do you address them regarding that?
Well, I've never had anybody ask me that, because the people that I've talked to have been so sure that it was. And why would someone, what would be the purpose of such trickery?
There's a lot of conjecture out there. I don't even want to put it out there because I don't want to put that into the people's heads and help to perpetrate fear, when I think, you said, I think the most poignant part of the statement a few moments ago is the fact that when you're in the presence. And here's the difference. Like, if your daughter were to appear to you and say, Mom, I miss you. You should take your life and come with me. Then maybe you can question where this is coming from. But if this is a comfort and a love and something wonderful, that's it. If you're getting something, as you said earlier, if you're getting something that's uneasy and uncomfortable, you say, you're in the realm of the dead. You need to leave now. You need to go. and you don't give them that permission to have that effect on you. And that's the delineating line for me. So I just, I wanted to get your perspective, which you'd already kind of said. I just repositioning it for you. But I think that is, if you're afraid that you're not truly having that experience, what was the takeaway? Was it love? Was it happiness and comfort? Then there's no doubt that what you just experienced was your loved one.
Well, you've said that very well. I think that's wise. Ask what's the takeaway? Because if it's good, you got it. And there's you said my point of view, but there's another point of view here, because
Please.
as you made that statement about, oh, Mom, I miss you, or why don't you take your own life so we can be together? I got the rush up the left side of my body. This is my daughter going, yeah, no, that's not me. We don't do that.
Right.
I know she's always around, but I don't always feel her. But I did then, and it was pretty strong. So.
Right. One of my favorite, most chilling episodes of Twilight Zone was with little Billy Mooney from Lost in Space, when his favorite grandma passes away, and then spends the entire episode talking to him on that toy phone, trying to convince himself to die, go out into traffic, going all of that. That is one of the most terrifying moments, but I can guarantee you the love and the bond between that mother or grandmother and grandson would never lead to something like that. So if that's something you're encountering, then seek help, friends. Then seek help. But otherwise, enjoy and embrace those beautiful moments and the messages that come through.
And trust that these people, the last thing they want is for us to die. I'll tell a story here. This is one that's not in the book. I've told it a few times on this kind of situation, but I love this story. A woman's daughter has died, and she is I don't actually remember the time frame, the distance, but she's driving down the road, and she hears her daughter's voice say very distinctly, Mom, bring the car to a stop. And you'll note that she doesn't say, stop the car. That would be a sudden action. Mom, bring the car to a stop. So up ahead, a little bit ahead, is a green traffic light. She slows and stops at the green traffic light. Who stops at a green traffic light? But she does, and a big truck runs the red light right in front of her, where she would probably have been had she not listened to her daughter's voice. And that's the kind of thing that our deceased beloveds do for us. They don't ask us to come join them. They do the opposite. They honor life, and it doesn't seem to matter if they have taken their own life. That was not a suicide situation, but if they have, that does not mean that they think that's a good idea. That's what they did, but they're not encouraging it in anyone else.
Agreed.
So, yeah.
All right. Let's hear another one or two of your favorite stories, please.
All right. Favorite stories. Let me see. What's coming to mind? Nothing is coming to mind. Oh, well, this is just a silly little one, but a woman has inherited a rocking chair from her mother. And this chair becomes her favorite chair. It's the one she reads in, it's the one she watches TV in, it's the one she sits in, it's in the living room. And I think it's holiday, I think it's Christmas, and her housemate has a friend come to visit who she doesn't know. And that the woman whose mother has died that did not know. And the woman sits down in this rocking chair, and suddenly she jumps up and she says, "Is this a vibrating chair?" And they go, "No, it's not a vibrating chair. It's my mother's chair." And she sits back down again, and she jumps up again, and she moves to another chair. It only vibrates when someone else sits in it. It doesn't vibrate when the daughter sits in it. And I think it's the mother simply saying, "This is your chair, honey. This is where I can comfort you." And if you think about what a chair this chair had arms, and it was cushioned, so it was like an embrace when she sat in that chair, when the daughter sat in the chair, and it wasn't meant for anyone else. That's who the embrace was for. And this is an example of these very weird things that the dead seemed capable of doing. Another woman had went out, came back, and as she's unlocking the door, she hears the blender going in the kitchen. There's nobody in the house, right? The blender is going in the kitchen. And her friend said to her later, well, couldn't you have left the blender on when you left the house? Who leaves an empty blender on as you walk out of the house, And the dead seem very good at manipulating electrical equipment of some kind. The blender went off, so the woman says, it's my husband. She knows that it's her husband, just saying hi, And a blender left like that I actually don't know this, but I've assumed that if you leave a blender on for an hour while you're gone with nothing in it, that it might burn itself out. And it wasn't overheated or anything, so she knew it had only been on for a moment or so. I've heard of TV channels that change themselves either in the middle of a show, or you leave it on one channel, you turn it off, you come back, it's on another channel. Other things like that. Alarm. One was an alarm system where the daughter had inherited her mother's home, and they were selling the home. Now, there's an alarm system in the daughter's home, and it just started malfunctioning after her mother's death. And they would call the alarm company, and the alarm company would come and find nothing wrong with it. And they called the alarm company enough and said, well, a big truck must have gone by. Oh, really? A big truck throws off your alarm system? And then when they went to, they had to go some distance to finalize the sale on the mother's house, it malfunctioned while they were gone. And the daughter really felt every time that this was the mother communicating in this odd way, kind of a pain in the neck way. But if you think about what an alarm system does, an alarm system is to protect us. Well, mothers protect us. An alarm system says, something's wrong when something is wrong. And it seems like a kind of a maternal role in a way. So it seemed not inappropriate. Just like the chair gave an embrace, the alarm system acted in a somewhat maternal way, more like we act when our kids are real little, not when they're adults, or at least we hope not anyway.
You know what I love is one of my favorite stories like this is the fact that one of the biggest skeptics out there, Michael Shermer from Skeptic Magazine, right? Dr. Michael Shermer, when he got married a few years ago, and he talks about this story openly, he is not a believer in the paranormal, but an old radio of, I believe it was his, Tim, if you remember this better than I, correct me, but I believe it was his wife's old radio, which belonged to her father, and he had passed away before they had gotten married, of course. This radio that did not work suddenly turned on, played an entire song, and then turned off, and has never done that before or since. But it was on their wedding day, and it was like her father's favorite song that radio switched on long to play. Was that?
Well, that's what I was going to.
It's been a while since I've heard the story, so I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the generality of how it went.
Well, what I was about to ask you, but you answered it before I asked, was what was the song? Did it have significance? Because that's the kind of thing I've heard.
I don't recall, but I believe it was something that meant something to her or meant something to her dad.
Right.
But that it was his radio, and it turned on and played and then turned off and never did it again is pretty remarkable. So those are the kind of golden moments. And he said, he says, I can't tell you it was a ghost. I have no explanation for it, but I won't say a ghost did this. But, again, it's up to your interpretation of it. I mean, I'm always cautious with things when I say, today you were thinking of Dad and then you saw his pack of cigarettes, and it's, nobody ever smokes Pall Malls, but there they are. But you're thinking of Dad today, so maybe are you triggered mnemonically to notice something like that? So I do say there are points you do have to be kind of cautious and question some things, but, there are other instances like that are just, they seem so overwhelmingly, glaringly obvious that something exciting is really taking place.
Yes, and I think that's pretty neat that the guy who's a skeptic should at least accept the possibility that there might have been something there.
It is very cool stuff. We've got time for about one more story. What's one more tale you can tell us of after death communication?
Well, let's see. Well, here's sometimes we get messages in dreams for other people, and that can be a pretty interesting experience. And sometimes people say, well, why don't they just go directly to the person? But often it's because the person won't listen, won't accept it. And when the message comes from someone else, they're more open to hearing it. So I think there are a couple of message stories I can think of. One, a woman barely knew this man. I think she had catered something for him or something. I think she did catering. So it was not a strong connection at all. But he died. He had a daughter who worked in a business in the town, and a bank, I think it was. And the woman I was interviewing had a dream in which he said that he wanted her to tell his daughter that he was all right, just that he was all right. And she thought, oh, this is ridiculous. I barely know this woman. Maybe I met her once. I know who she is. I know where she works. I don't really know her. So she put it off, but it just kept niggling at her. And finally she went to this place of business. She had to wait in a line. It took her a while to get up to see the woman, and all the while she's ready to bolt, But she does go, sticks it out, and goes to the woman's desk and sits down and says, I know this is very strange. I know that we barely know each other. I barely knew your father. She's really feeling a little embarrassed, but she says, I had a dream, and your father told me to tell you that he's all right. And the woman just bursts into tears. She says, I've been waiting to hear this. I've been waiting to hear this. This is what I needed. This is what I needed. And she's thrilled that this message has been delivered. So now the first woman, the woman I interviewed, has a much deeper connection with her dreams. She trusts her dreams a little more because of this. And the daughter has been greatly relieved. And there is another dream with a message in it that I can think of off the top of my head.
Please.
That is where the child had the dream. And she's an adult now. She's a former neighbor of mine. But she dreamed after her beloved grandmother died that her grandmother had a message for her son, for my interviewee's father and the grandmother's son, is saying that it was all right. Now, what was meant by that, she found out later. Jenny delivered the message to her father, who immediately began to cry because he knew what the message meant. The grandmother had had a stroke, and prior to that, the father had committed to her that he would not put her in a nursing home, but after she had the stroke, they were unable to care for her at home, and he did put her in the nursing home. And what the grandmother was saying was, it's all right. It was all right that you put me in this nursing home. I know that you had to do that, regardless of the commitment that you had made. And so that was tremendously relieving. And then just another little detail about it was that when this 12-year-old child is describing to her father the details of the dream, she describes the man who's sitting beside her grandmother, and the father says, "Oh, that's your grandfather." And he had died when she was very young, and she didn't even remember him. So
that's great. Boy, that's some real corroboration that you're able to pull out there.
Yeah.
Very cool. The After Death, let me try that again in English. The After Death Chronicles, True Stories of Comfort, Guidance, and Wisdom from Beyond the Veil. Have you had encounters, folks? If you have, share them with us. You can always call our Voices from Beyond voicemail, 651-300-4977. We may play it on an upcoming Saturday Parashare. Again, that's 651-300-4977. Have you had after-death communication with a loved one, friend, relative, coworker? We'd love to hear from you. Give us a call, 651-300-4977. Leave your story. If it's longer than 3 minutes, just hang up, call back, continue telling your story. Tim will put them all together, and we'll play the entire thing on an upcoming story. You can share a story about afterlife communication or any paranormal encounter with us. We're always willing to hear your stories and share them with our audience all around the world. Annie, please continue to stay safe. Thank you for putting books like this out there and sharing your stories and the stories of those that you've collected with us.
Well, you're most welcome. I've enjoyed this a whole lot.
So have we. Thank you.
You do very good work. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Remember to check out True Crime Tuesday this week. Tim, we're going Wild West.
All right.
We're going rogue. We're going to check out the real story behind the shooting at OK Corral, the vengeance ride from hell, and stories and things you may not really know about the Earp brothers, Doc Holliday, and more of the Tombstone crimes. That takes place this Tuesday, plus all new Dumb Crimes, Stupid Criminals. And boy, do we have some dumb crimes and stupid criminals. Then we'll be back again next weekend with more of the best in paranormal talk radio. And Don Wildman joins us next Sunday as we lead into the new show. I'll be out on the road filming again for Holzer Files, so keep me in your thoughts and prayers for safety for me and the entire production team as we continue to do that. We'll be back again. Thank you all for tuning in and being a part of our world here on Darkness Radio.